welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, thank you so much for clicking on this video, and if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for your love and support. It means so much to me. So as you guys can tell from my background, we are back in the Netherlands. It was so amazing being with family and friends, but we are now back home, which feels great. And I will tell you what, guys, it is hot in the Netherlands. Oh my gosh, so many of my friends told me that it was really hot, but it was not until we arrived back and we walked out of Schiphol airport that I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe how hot it is. So you guys might hear a constant buzzing kind of noise in the background. That is the fan, and I need to leave it on, otherwise it's not going to be pretty. It'll be a sweaty mess. But anyways, guys, it was such an amazing trip back home. It was so great spending time with friends and family who we hadn't seen in a year. My sister threw me a gender reveal party for the baby, so we now know what the gender of this baby is, which is so exciting. But overall, it was such an amazing time. Thank you so much to my sister, if she's watching this, for throwing me the most amazing gender reveal party. And now we are back to business. Cam's about to start school in about 2.5 weeks. He actually starts summer camp tomorrow, so he's really excited about that. But enough of that. I want to talk to you guys about what today's video is going to be about, which I will be talking about some of the differences in healthcare here in the Netherlands and in the United States. Now, I didn't have a lot of experience with healthcare matters here in the Netherlands until I got pregnant. That's when I started seeing my midwife. Obviously, I really had no need to see her before that. And that's when I've also made a few trips over to my house search, who is my GP. And so I wanted to talk to you guys about these differences that I've now noticed as I make these trips to go and see them. That way, if you're not from the Netherlands and you're new here, or you're visiting here and you do find yourself sick, or you're just curious about what it's like going to see a doctor here in the Netherlands, I've compiled a few notes just so you know what to expect at the GP or midwife's appointment and how they may differ from what you're used to in the United States or whatever other country that you may be coming from. So you guys know how we do it here. Go ahead and get comfortable, get yourself your favorite snack, and we'll get right into it. So guys, let's get right into the video, which is all about all the differences that you may encounter when you go and visit a GP, a doctor, or a midwife here in the Netherlands. And my reference point is always going to be how things are in the US, but my intention of making this video is to help give you some insight as to what things are like and to help ease any surprises and just to let you know what to expect. Because I'll tell you what, guys, what always surprises me the most about going to the GP or the midwife in the Netherlands is always being unprepared. And here's my quick disclaimer, guys. Of course, what follows in this video are my personal experiences. Not every single doctor or GP or midwife in the Netherlands at every single place is going to have things as I describe them. There are always exceptions. In addition to that, this is not a comprehensive list, else we would be here for 5 hours, and I know none of you want that. And with that, let's get right into number one, which is the price. So of course, this is the biggest one, and I've talked about this point in so many more of my past videos, with the most recent one being 5 things that I can do here in the Netherlands and not in the United States. If you haven't caught that video yet, I'm going to link it somewhere here in the screen. Go over and check that out. So I'm not going to waste so much time on this point because it'll be like beating a dead horse. But anyways, guys, the amount of money that we pay for healthcare here in the Netherlands, personally, as compared to what we paid in the United States, is a fraction of the cost. In addition to that, we do not have to pay any cost for Cameron's health insurance, and that is because he is under the age of 18. And so it goes without saying, guys, our health insurance costs in the United States were exorbitant. I mean, it was just absolutely insane how much money we paid for medical costs. Now guys, with the price, one huge thing that I've noticed here in the Netherlands is that anytime you go and see the GP, the midwife, or whoever it may be, you don't have that copay that you always pay at the beginning or the end of your visit in the United States. Now we do pay the eigenrisico, which is the equivalent of the deductible at the beginning of the year. So the copay price, I'm sure, is kind of covered with that. However, in the United States, States, not only did we pay our deductible, but you also do pay your copay at the beginning or end of doctor's visits. And that's the one thing that we do not pay separately here in the Netherlands. And that's been really huge because those copays definitely add up. In addition to that, the prices of different things, whether you're getting blood work done or a test, are usually very discreet and open. So what I mean by that is that if you ask maybe the receptionist of the place where you're going to get the test done, how much the test will cost, they can usually more than always tell you how much that will run you. However, in the United States, it's always very hazy. You can never really get a direct answer as to how much you'll be paying for whatever you may be getting done. So that's always very frustrating. And like I've mentioned before, it's anxiety inducing and usually just very stressful, because most of the time you're usually getting a huge bill for whatever it is that you may have done, regardless of whether you do have health insurance. Now guys, the next thing is the waiting room. Now I've noticed that the waiting rooms here in the Netherlands for the GP or the midwife's office, now I'm mostly gonna refer to those two because those are the healthcare professionals that I have visited, and the waiting rooms are very simple. You have the chairs lined up against the wall in a way where you can kind of see everyone that's coming in and going out. And the one thing that I've noticed happens a lot here in the waiting room is that as someone new comes in, you know, they're always sure to greet you, or you always greet them as you're walking in. So unlike in the US where I would like run in, or it feels like everyone runs in and goes to the chair in the corner and not say hi to everyone, it's very different here in the Netherlands. I've noticed that here in the Netherlands, it's very important that when you see people, you acknowledge them. So even just a simple goedemorgen, a goedemiddag, like I've noticed that everyone does that as they arrive into the doctor's office, or they say to the person who may be arriving. And so now I'm always sure to say it to the other patients before I take a seat. Now, when it's time for your appointment, the GP or midwife, at least mine, will personally come and get you from the waiting room. They'll just call your name when it's your turn, which is normal. Now, something else to note in my experience is that the GPs or midwives pretty much work alone outside of the secretaries in the office, especially in the small practices. So unlike the US, you will not be greeted by a nurse or a medical assistant who will grab you from the waiting room and then take you into an office and get your vitals or your medical history before seeing the doctor. The GP himself or herself will do that. Also, something to be aware of that I thought was very different is that the Dutch GPs or midwives don't wear the white medical coats. They don't have the suits or quote unquote formal wear, or even wear a stethoscope around their neck like they typically do in the US. From my experience, they're usually just in regular plain clothes. This was definitely different for me. I did not realize that the GP would be dressed down, but now I know. So if you're new here to the Netherlands and someone comes and calls your name, whatever you may think a doctor should or should not look like, just act accordingly and assume that that person is the GP. And right on to number 3, which this is a big one for me, is that no nurse is usually present during exams. And this is one that majorly caught me off guard. So it's just you and the GP or you and the midwife alone in the room. And this was very, very different for me. Now, I'll tell you what, guys, coming from the US, you know, we're used to hearing about so many situations where bad things happen to people. And so it's almost like it's been ingrained in our brains that something bad may or will happen. And so you're used to certain things being a certain way, especially when it comes to seeing a doctor, you know, who is basically inside and, you know, touching your body and, you know, checking things out. You always are used to there being a secondary person in the room. It's just never you and the doctor alone. And I do have to admit that it is pretty messed up that we've been raised always thinking that something bad is going to happen, but that's because bad things are always happening. I'm sure if you went in and checked one of the trending newses right now, something is going on with a doctor somewhere. And so for me, where it was my first experience here in the Netherlands with just me and the GP alone in the room, initially it kind of made me feel uneasy, but that's because how our brains have been wired coming from the US. Because my initial thoughts were that if anything strange happened, and it's sad that I even have to think this way, but again, like I said, that's how our brains have been wired, is that if anything strange happened in that room, then it will be my word against the GP's word. And so that whole concept of being alone, one on one-on-one with just me and the GP in the room is something that I was not used to, but now I've definitely come around and have gotten used to it. In the US, it's pretty much a given that there was always a third party in the room. So be it a nurse or a medical assistant, especially for the more sensitive exams. And that was both for the doctor's protection and the patient's protection. And I find that something else that's different in the US than it is here in the Netherlands is that a medical assistant or a nurse of the opposite sex is always present for doctors who are the opposite sex of the patients. I have never encountered a third party present in any of my exams. Now, I wouldn't say that it never happens here. Again, this is just my personal experience. So if you're coming from the US or whatever other country, I'm not sure how it works, just be aware that more than likely here in the Netherlands, it's just going to be you and the doctor in the room. The next thing is urgent care centers. Now in the US, it's quite common to see for-profit franchises, usually privately owned in strip malls of urgent cares or in other shopping centers. So these medical care centers usually have convenient hours, they have emergency medical care staff, and they're perfect when you need to see a doctor for something that's urgent but not an emergency, or if you're in an area far away from home and your GP isn't there. So these urgent cares have x-ray machines and that sort of thing. Now in the Netherlands, they do not have these for-profit urgent care centers like this. Now to clarify, yes, the Netherlands has emergency rooms, and they also have the little house of posts where you can go after hours in case you have an emergency. But what I'm talking about are the for-profit urgent care centers, which are totally different from these two things. So definitely the Netherlands does have emergency rooms. You know, you can get care for emergency situations and you will be seen. Absolutely. I'm talking about the really common urgent care centers, the walk-in centers that you can find in most areas within the USA. You know, they have them in cities and suburbs, and they provide ambulatory services outside of a traditional hospital setting. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. As I mentioned earlier on in this video, my experience with healthcare here in the Netherlands has been very limited because I only recently started seeing the midwife or the GP after I got pregnant. Before that, thankfully, none of us had to go to the GP for any issues. But obviously, as we're here longer, I'm sure new situations will arise, and later on down the road, I will make an updated video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't already, I hope you would consider subscribing to the channel because it does support my channel and let me know that you guys are enjoying my content. If you want to follow up with my daily life, you can go ahead and follow me on Instagram. That's also linked below in the description box. I love you guys, and until next time, Dewey.